We've all said it at some point. I'm just a creature of habit. And sure, there's a lot to say for consistency and routine. But what about that other aphorism? The only constant in life is change. Maybe we're creatures of change too. In this podcast, we'll explore change from a variety of perspectives. Stories of people who've made huge changes in the trajectory of their lives, others who've made small but lasting and impactful changes in their day-to-day lives. And we'll also just nerd out about the science of human behavior and how we can get better at executing the small changes and embracing the big ones. I'm Valerie Martin, and you're listening to Creatures of Change. Hi friends, welcome back to Creatures of Change. I am sitting here once again recording this intro in my sports bra after finishing my morning workout. Since I am still stubbornly doing all of the podcast things by myself, I've not yet got up the YouTube videos for episodes 1 and 2 onto the channel, but they are uploaded, so I just need to caption and all of that, which hopefully by the time you're listening to this, will be done because I should have some time to do that later today. So you can stay tuned on my socials at Val K Martin, VALKAY Martin. And I'll let you guys know when the videos are up. And then hopefully for this and future episodes, they'll be up pretty quickly after the audio goes up. So there is that. And also in the future, I will probably just record the guest intros or episode intros while I'm with the guest, because it feels a little weird sitting here and doing this by myself after the fact. So yes, that change will be coming too. But while I am here talking to you one-on-one, I will share that I got back in town 5 days ago now from my 7-day silent retreat, and I can't begin to say how transformative it was. I'm in the middle of writing a blog post about that, which hopefully will be also ready later today. Have some time to work on that kind of stuff today. So I just had such a wonderful time. It was more challenging in some ways than I expected and less challenging in other ways. So I'll look forward to sharing that post once that's ready, and highly recommend that if you have an opportunity to do a silent retreat, give yourself the gift, even if it sounds like, what the heck are you going to do with your time? You can't read, you can't write, you can't do any of those things. But just being a person and not having an option to stimulate and distract yourself it's pretty incredible. So I don't think there's a whole lot that I want to get into for today. If you are listening from Nashville, just know that we do have a couple of groups at the Gaia Center with current availability. So you can check that out on our website, GaiaCenter.co, or let me know if you have any questions. And let's get into our guest bio. I had so much fun recording this conversation recently with my friend Rosa. Rosa Castano worked in the tourism and hospitality field, leading sales campaigns across the country for two of the largest tourist industries in the Nashville market, and then was forced to pivot during the pandemic, which you'll hear all about in our conversation. So that allowed her to make a pivot to the wellness industry, where she has since completed a 200-hour yoga teacher training, which is how we met in 2019, and also since then has completed a 200-hour meditation teacher training, and now is fully focused on bringing workplace well-being to businesses and also in individual one-on-ones, wellness-focused sessions. She leads yoga classes, and Rosa is just a dynamic person. So you will hear that come through in our conversation. You can find more about Rosa and her services, her offerings for businesses and for individuals at rosacastano.com. And of course, these links will be in the show notes as well. And you can follow her on Instagram at wellbeingwithrosa. All right, let's get into the conversation with Rosa Castano. Thank you for being here with me. I'm super excited to chat with you. It's been a while.
It has been a little bit.
Yeah.
This little thing happened, about the last 2 years that's kind of made it hard to see people.
Yes. Yeah. And I know that some of your pivots, some of the big changes in your life have taken place during that time. So we'll definitely get into that. But I would love to just kind of know that, when I put this out there, this idea of talking about change, talking about the pivots that people have made in their lives, you were the first person who filled out my form, which I loved. I was like, yes, I definitely want to talk to Rosa. And it seems like change is just something that you either, I don't know if you've always embraced it or you've learned to embrace it. Like, how would you describe your relationship with change?
I would say a little bit of both, because it's one of those things that I didn't even realize I was doing until, just in conversations with people and bringing them up, and they're like, oh, wow, you're doing that. You've done this, and this, and you've made, and I was like, I guess so. And because you sometimes do it. I've had changes out of self-preservation.
Yeah.
I have changes because they were forced upon me.
Life threw you a curveball.
Exactly. And I believe that it can either go one or two ways. You can let it cripple you, or you can see it as that challenge and rise with it. Because I think sometimes the other option isn't necessarily an option.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
It really is more out of that self-preservation, because sometimes you just do what you have to do and you push through until you get to that baseline where it's like, okay, this feels right again. But yeah.
So, before some of these big changes, would you have said that you're usually someone who takes on a challenge head first, or do you like things to stay consistent?
I feel like I'm a little bit of an oxymoron because both. When I always would give the analogy of a group project, right? I never wanted to start off in charge. I was always happy to hang out in the background and let somebody else dictate, but I can't sit around and watch chaos happen. And so I'd inevitably end up in charge of things. And so it's a little bit of both. I'm happy when things can be, consistent and steady,
just kind of work.
Exactly. But then when the opportunity is needed, I do push through it, and I look at it as the challenge that can be, or how can I do this, and kind of just go for it. And I'm not someone who is typically very indecisive, so when those moments come up for me, it feels very foreign, because usually I'm very good at making decisions.
Yep.
So when that does come up for me, I always get very curious about it, because I'm like, why can't I just make a decision? Why am I so indecisive? We were talking about, off mic here, about a business name. I could come up with probably business names for literally everybody else's stuff, but when it came from my own, I couldn't find anything that made sense, that felt aligned with what I was doing, or a word or a phrase that I was like, if I put this out into the world, people will just get it.
Yeah.
So I stopped letting that be a hindrance and just was like, well, here's my name.
That's
kind of all I've got to it, and then just push through with that one.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that not one company, business that I've worked with is like, sorry, we're not working with you because you don't have a company name. Right? It's the stories that we build up in our own head.
Yes.
And then when you just put it out there and just do it, people will come, and nobody's going to think otherwise.
Yeah, that is so true. And it's so true in every area. There's this planning paralysis that we get. It's kind of the stereotypical example of, somebody wants to take up running. And so instead of just yes, you need a decent pair of shoes to not hurt yourself, right? But you don't need the top of the top of the top newest technology in running shoes and the best app. Which app should I use? Which smartwatch should I use? Which electrolyte should I use? You can paralyze yourself around trying to plan all the details, quote unquote, correctly, and just never actually start doing the thing.
Exactly.
And very much the same with business, right? Because there's 8 million things that you could let yourself get hung up on, Or you could know, okay, I've, taken care of some of those important foundational pieces to protect myself and to know that I'm giving good quality work. I will figure out the rest.
Exactly. And it really is exactly that, right? Just start imperfectly, but simply just start. And it is, like you said, it translates into so many aspects of life, but very much into business and just kind of figuring out things along the way and pivoting where you need to pivot and, dropping things when it doesn't feel right and just going, though, and not getting in that analysis paralysis. And I know so many people who, they have to have the, I have to have all my certifications done. I have to have all of this and I have to all of this. But I think they forget a lot about their soft skills that they've learned along the way and how those things in their own lived life experiences really can sometimes mean more when leading with empathy and connection with people and what you have to teach. Don't get me wrong, the certifications are important too, to be able to just have that backup, right? And say look, I did study this. I do know it.
Yep.
But I know people who are constantly looking for the next thing, and then they'll put off the starting. And then, it's 5-10 years from now, and then what?
Yeah.
It's never too late to start, but they could have been starting earlier.
Right. So you run your own business now, which we'll talk about what that is, but that was not always the plan. That was not always necessarily in the cards for you because there was a family business that you were a part of, right? Tell us about that.
It was always the plan for me to run a business, but I did not know it was going to be this business.
Yeah.
I grew up, my mom was a single mom. She started her own company when, at this point, 30-something years ago, in the medical equipment world. And so I really grew up around it, and by the time it came for high school to figure out what I wanted to do, I was I knew I wanted to study business, and I wanted to continue to study Spanish, but I didn't really know much beyond that. So my mom said, well, before you go waste my money trying to find yourself, why don't you intern for me for a year? So I said, okay. And I did, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And she is not the type who is going to ever give anything out just because I'm her daughter.
Yeah.
I started by cleaning the bathrooms, stocking the warehouse, all of the grunt work. And I didn't realize at the time, but she was grooming me to know every single aspect of the business from the ground up. Because I think in a lot of businesses like that, there's a sense of entitlement that goes in, and that you deserve a certain role just because you are the child of the owner. And you need to have that humility that says no, I know how to stock shelves. No, I know how to take this stuff apart. I know how to do everything, because if the pandemic has taught us anything, that sometimes you will just have to completely scale back and go back to doing everything yourself.
Right.
So it's important to know all aspects. So I did, and then I worked my way up. And I realized I had a very keen knack for sales, and I really enjoyed what I did with her. And I got to work with people all over the world. And as someone who she also instilled a case of wanderlust into, it was a really fun part, because on any given day I was talking to, Mexico and Spain and Greece and the UK. And I was what other business would I be able to do this in?
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that, you just kind of kept going and growing, and college never happened. And the whole idea was to eventually take over the family business.
Yeah.
And I worked with her for about 9 years. In 2015, she had a stroke. I was with her. It was thankfully a very mild one. We got her to the hospital right away. And the funny part is that she didn't even have symptoms until we were getting ready to leave. And when I say symptoms, I mean the classic telltale of the droopy arm, the eyes.
So she knew something was up.
She
needed to go to the hospital.
Ironically, she's left-handed, and so she was my handwriting's all off.
Yeah.
I watched her run into a door frame because her depth perception was off. But she had been driving my siblings home and was it was so weird. I kept kind of veering over into the other side. And so I'm calling my medical friends, and they're sounds like it could possibly be a stroke. You should really get to her. But one of the things that I've also learned to undo from her is just the martyrdom syndromes that she has. And classic case was in this one where my little sister had softball practice. She was like, we have to drop your sister off at softball practice first. And
Before going to the ER.
I was like, absolutely not. We're going to the hospital. Her softball practice will be no, she has to go. And I was like, you are insane, woman. So the only way I could placate her was to call a friend to come pick my little sister up from the hospital to bring her to, I know, it was ridiculous. But when we were getting ready to leave the hospital, they couldn't find anything. They did all the tests. There was no medical reason as to why. And it was because the stroke was, like, the clot was, like, actively happening.
Oh, wow.
And so I prayed, and I was just like, I know there's something wrong. Please give us a sign before we leave here. We had our discharge papers. She was putting on her sweater. And then as she was putting the sweater up over her head, that left arm started to fall. She was like, I'm not leaving the hospital, am I?
Yeah.
I said, no, you're not. So we checked her in, and so that happened. So that really changed the trajectory of kind of where my life was going, because at this point I was off on my own. I had my own house. You know, my siblings were still in school. But I, carefree. I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
And so I moved back in with her because we did at that point run a lot of our, most of our business out of the house at that point. We had been in a large facility before and scaled down till it was just the two of us. So that part was at least easy, that the office was in there. But I found myself all of a sudden at, I think I was 25, her caretaker, running the business, running the household, and my siblings were still in middle school, high school.
Wow. Yeah.
So it was having to take care of all of that. I did have another sister, but she wasn't overly helpful, and I think it wasn't from any, fault of her own, just the capacity. She was in her, I think she was maybe 20, 21.
Yeah.
So found myself having to deal with all of that. And so there was a lot of highs, a lot of lows, but one of the things that came out of that is that the rose-colored glasses that I saw my mom through that lens came off with relationships and some other things, and it was kind of like that glass shattering moment.
Kind of a reckoning.
It was.
Yeah.
And it was the hardest decision I ever had to make, because she and I really started to get into fights about business and her personal life, without getting into that part of it. But I saw kind of a part of her that I had never seen before, and that's where the self-preservation came in.
Yeah.
I was like, I either have to, if I don't step away from this business now, then I don't know what the fate of my relationship with my mom's going to be in the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was dating my now husband at the time, and he was a great support. And the hard part is that my mom really wanted to villainize him.
He's the reason why you're backing away from this, or
exactly. And she has her own ghost from my mom, or my nana's second husband,
having seen when maybe that did happen.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's exactly what was happening. And and so it was really hard, and it took many years. Thankfully my husband is very resilient.
Yeah.
To not have, his feelings were hurt, but to overcome that, because there was a lot of that. So I was all of a sudden faced with what I thought was the rest of my life already laid out in front of me,
right.
Taking over the business eventually, and then, creating my own little mini empire with it.
Yeah.
That after 9 years, that being the only thing I knew, stepping away from that.
And when you started to think, maybe this is not my path, did you have in mind kind of a backup plan, or what else might I do? What do I want to do?
No, there was no backup plan. What ended up happening was I really had a hard think about, what do I enjoy? I was like, I enjoy Nashville. I enjoy showing people around here. And I kind of just started looking at things. And it was really hard, because at this point I had 9 years of sales experience at a leadership level, both domestic and international. So, but I was only 25.
Right. And didn't have the piece of paper college degree in case that was going to be a barrier.
Exactly. And so I was kind of how do I translate my skills, my soft skills, my actual skills into something that makes people notice what I'm capable of? And I'll tell you, it came to me because I really struggled for a while with a little bit of an identity crisis, thinking that people are just gonna be like, oh, she just has a high school diploma.
Yeah.
And what that, from outside looking in, what that looks like, not knowing, what my actual history is.
Right.
And I was at a dog park one day, and this man, I somehow just struck up conversation with him. He was the CEO of, I don't even know what company. So I was telling him a little bit about, like, my reservations, and he said, I will tell you that with your sales experience, with your workplace experience, if it was between you and someone who just graduated college, I would pick you every day.
Heck yeah.
He was like, time over time. And so that was the first time I had thought about it that way, and that really helped me.
Cool.
It just kind of empower myself and be like, oh, I am valuable in that aspect, right?
Yeah.
And like my knowledge can translate into the workplace outside of, mom's company.
Yeah. And also, sidebar, like, just what a good example of how powerful our words can be and how we don't know the impact that we may have on someone. So it's like, exactly. If you see something in someone, like, tell them, like that one comment has stuck with you.
It has. And I don't know his name, who he was. Like, it was just crazy. And so I started looking at jobs, and I find this director of sales position at this entrepreneur company. And I interviewed with them, and I was very, very excited. And like the only downside is that, like, the pay was terrible because it was a startup company. Mm-hmm. And we promised equity and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, this sounds just so much fun, because it was about like bachelorette parties and bringing it into Nashville. And I was like, I can do this. I mean, I can plan. That sounds easy. I can sell people. And it was fun. I got the job. I was one of the very first hires. So it was basically the CEO, the COO or CMO, and then myself as director of sales. Mm-hmm. And we built this little company up and got like pretty good recognition, and then got a TV show on CMT and all of the hilarity that came with that. But it kind of came to another head where it just didn't feel right anymore.
Yeah, and was that like a sudden kind of realization, or was it gradual that you're just like, I think it's time for me to move on?
Again, it was both.
Yeah.
I saw the path of what was happening, but constantly hoping for change for the better. Mm-hmm. And another, anecdotal story, I was talking to a mentor of mine. I was asking him, I said, I really am struggling with, like, do I weather the storm, or do I go down with the ship? Like, I don't know. Am I going to weather this? And, like, we'll come out on the other side. And it'll be so great. And he said, never go down with the ship unless it's your own ship.
Oof. And even then, it's like, I mean, sometimes we have to see something all the way through. Mm-hmm. But sometimes there's also that, like, sunk cost fallacy, right? Like, thinking about entrepreneurs who are hemorrhaging money or whatever, right? That they're...
I'll double down. I'll dig my heels in
like,
deeper.
No, that's not the only option.
Listen to the writing on the wall.
So like, sometimes even if it is your ship, is there a way to ethically jump off?
Exactly. And I firmly believe that all of my decisions, my whole life, is just being guided. And I think it's a point of listening and looking for those signs and the synchronicities, because they are there. So I made the decision. I swear sometimes you were talking about, to throw out the word manifesting, right?
Yeah.
I thought that week, I remember going to my now husband and was saying, I'm going to start looking.
Yeah.
I need to get out of this. This TV show hadn't even aired. Like, that's how much I knew, like, I don't believe that what we did is going to impact change. Mm-hmm. And I'm ready to get off this ship. Mm-hmm. That same week, an organization that I'm a part of in Nashville here called the Troubadour Society, which is the Young Professional Society at the Country Music Hall of Fame. The director, because I was on the leadership board there, she said, out of the blue, we just had a position open up. I don't know if you're even looking, but I just wanted to let you know. And I was like, well, funny enough, I literally just decided this week that I'm looking.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it came from me being so moved by just who she was, and as an incredible leader, and as an incredible person, and as a woman in power in her position, that I just invited her to lunch. months earlier and just said, I'd really like to just speak with you, like bask in your presence. I don't know, something.
And don't ask her to pick her brain, right?
Right. Yes.
People, I'm like, just any other terminology. Would you like to have coffee? Don't pick my brain.
That's exactly
please.
what I was like. Can I just bring you to lunch? I'd love to have just like a discussion with you. So we did, and so that was so great. And so again, you see the little breadcrumbs. Like, what if I hadn't asked her to lunch and like shown that initiative in her, just interest in her, and that when it did come around, that I was a person that she thought of.
And you put yourself, like you said, you were on some kind of leadership committee or something with that. Like, that didn't just happen. You made a decision to do that. So it's like we put ourselves in the path, even if we don't know what potential thing that might come of this. And, the more thing, I think we can get tripped up on all of the, like, we should be saying no more. We should be saying yes more. If it's not hell no, yes, it's hell no. Like, it's not one thing for every person, but we have to put ourselves in the path of possibility.
We do, and I am very instinctual and really follow my gut instinct a lot, which is something I'm very grateful to have because it's protected me in a lot of ways and has guided me. But it's exactly those one things where you're like, I don't know why I want to ask her, but I'm just going to.
Yeah.
And listening to that. And that's, where it's a practice of being quiet to be able to hear that and getting in tune and having that self-awareness.
Yeah.
So I ended up interviewing, got the position several years in, loved it. It was such a fun way to just be interactive with the city and bring people into the city, and I loved it. But then, fast forward 2020.
Tourism, not so much a thing.
Not so much a thing. Yeah, you have to have tourists to have tourism. And everyone held on for a while. And we started working from home. I did my last trade show in Louisiana in March. The world, I think, shut down weeks later. And the funny part about that is that in February, we found out that we were pregnant.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Yeah, it's super.
Great timing.
And then May comes around and they start, eliminating job positions. And mine was unfortunately one of the ones. And so I find myself 5 months pregnant and without a job.
And I'm guessing that your family unit, you and your husband, relied on your income, right?
Well, thankfully, again, just watching out, because my husband had been in the music industry for a long time. He was a tour manager. That was his full career. Just so happens, once again, in December, November, he started interviewing for a job outside of the music industry as a tour director, and ended up getting the job. And this company thrived during the pandemic. So this is the one part that I always try to be brutally honest about, because I believe that people who have these like inspiring stories about how their job position was eliminated and then they they blaze forth and created this big thing, like it gives a false sense of reality, because the truth is that I've only been able to do what I've done because my husband's job has been able to sustain us.
Yeah. It gave you the flexibility.
It gave me the flexibility.
It's not that you couldn't have done what you did. It's just it might have taken longer. It might have looked different. You might have had to have had, side hustles or, some kind of part-time thing while you were building what you built.
Exactly. But I always like to try to be transparent about that, to not give people a false sense of reality.
Because there are so many people who get into this mindset of like, I'm unfulfilled in my work. I need to go follow my passion. And then they'll just freaking quit their job.
Just quit it cold turkey. No savings. No plan for action.
Put yourself in that position.
Exactly. I'm like, I am all about you taking risks, but take calculated risks.
Yes.
Set yourself up for success.
Be a grown-up about it.
Yes. And then go forth and conquer.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. So you had that flexibility. So when your job was eliminated, it wasn't like an emergency, but you were probably going, what do I do now?
Exactly. And that is where, had to pivot again, because again, I always knew I was going to own my own company, but didn't know it was going to be, I thought it was going to be in the medical, my mom's company. But then even outside of her thing, I always knew, I was like, there's still something inside me that's like, I want to have my own company. And then, she introduced me in my early 20s to yoga classes, and I really just fell in love with that practice. And I think it's so fun how you change the meaning of the different practices. When I first started, it was about the flexibility and the strength and being able to do all the things, and I loved to move quickly. But I have found in my own practice, and as I've gotten older, I just want to like be slow and soft. Like, I just want a nice restorative class to just like lay there and do nothing, because we go so fast in our lives that we need time to go down. So I was trying to figure out what exactly. I first thought, I'll be a mindfulness and empowerment coach, because there were things that I could like really lean into that way. And I have a personality that I feel like that people are attracted to and want to hear the story, and that I'm able to help. And then that kind of just felt like I was trying to throw spaghetti up against the wall.
Sure. How do I differentiate myself in this super saturated market? And
that's exactly what it was. And I dug it, but I was like, I feel like it's more than that.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, going back to the soft skills, what have I done? Like, what is marketable? And I was like, well, I've been in business for the past 15 plus years in different industries and different leadership levels, both domestic and internationally. I understand how the workplace works on both ends. I saw good and bad in different, small businesses, entrepreneurial startups, and then in large-scale nonprofits. And I saw similarities, I saw themes, and that was something kind of always turning in my head without ever wanting to get into HR, right? Yeah. And so I realized I can take my experience and expertise, because during the pandemic, I also got my meditation teacher training and mindfulness-based stress reduction training, and just, the wellness world and aspect, and all that it entails outside of like a movement practice, right? Really leaning more into like the mind body part of things, and how that can go. Because I thought for myself, like, everybody has these tools that they lean back on when they get stressed or something in the workplace. And I was realizing that was more of a me thing and less of an that everybody was more else in
your
thing.
Echo chamber.
Exactly. I had like a handful of other people who had, but like most of the time I just saw people who were stressed out, but not even knowing how to recognize the stress into them, or how to address it in a healthy manner.
Exactly. And that it's usually much more complex and nuanced than being like, hey, you should try yoga. I mean, maybe for some people that doorway gets them, interested and curious, and they pick up different skills and they figure out what works for them, and they can kind of self-direct that. But other people, need more specific skills, and they're like, no, I'm not gonna like go and take 2 hours out of my day to drive to a studio, pay $20 for class, like drive home, like I need something that fits my life better than that, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then even from the business side of it, from the workplace side of things, realizing that a pizza party is not going to cut it, right?
Nope.
I mean, I loved the pizza parties too, but it's so much more. And I think we're really moving into a space of where workplace well-being is at the forefront of everybody's mind. And so what kind of triggered for me the connection between the two was during the pandemic, I was seeing all of these essential like cries for help on social media. All these people who are working from home, who maybe for the first time in a long time were at home by themselves with their own thoughts and didn't like what was coming up.
Yeah.
And
it was a dark place.
It was, because they could usually distract themselves for things. They didn't have to. They could keep their agendas and their schedules busy, so they didn't ever have to deal with what was happening on the inside.
Yep.
So if you just numb out and constantly avoid, then you can just kind of, coast along. But when you're all of a sudden forced to sit with that, it brings up a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so I realized that there was absolutely a space for well-being in the workplace. And what I realized where my expertise comes in is that I have the past 15 years of workplace experience, so I can speak to people where they're at. Because often I do see where, wellness practitioners will come into the space and treat it like everyone just walked into their yoga studio. And I don't think that you can do that because it's a different caveat.
Context.
It's different, context. And I think you have to go in, leave like little tidbits of it. And if they pick up the tidbits and want to explore further, then they can seek on their own. But I think it's this person's job, my job, to go in and speak to people where they're at with a language that can easily be understood. And so that's where I have kind of found my bread and butter in that aspect, because I understand both sides of things. And I just want people to be well in the workplace. And so much of it starts at the C-suite level and coming down and allowing that permission. But it is constantly, again, when I first started really dealing with that imposter syndrome of being like, who am I to do this? We try to belittle our life experiences and we try to belittle what our value is to
and then compare, right?
Exactly.
Like, well, this person who's doing similar work has all these credentials and has this and like all this, and it's like, and that one person can't serve everybody, and they're also not going to be the best fit for everybody.
Exactly. And so I really, and I always leaned into this idea of community over competition, because exactly what you said, like there are other fantastic women who are doing what we're doing. Triluna, those ladies are incredible. Right? And they have different visions than I do as how we want to grow, because we've had these conversations, but it's for the same thing. And there's space enough for everybody. Yeah. Because exactly what you just said, where, they might resonate with other people and I might resonate with this people. And the thing is that there's more than enough to go around.
Yep.
When we eliminate that scarcity mindset and that we can lift each other up and together we can rise instead of trying to knock each other down and having that crabs in the bucket mentality, it's all just for the better.
Yeah.
So that's been the really fun space, and being able to work into that and just really leaning into it. And the beauty too that I always tell people is, no matter what industry you're in, don't burn bridges. Because you don't know where your next client's going to come from, or whether like they're hiring, but people are watching whether you think that they are or are not.
Yep.
And so when I finally kind of landed in, okay, this is what I'm doing. I'm leading stress management, cultivating resilience workshops for the workplace and the individual, and got to present it to my networks that I've had here in the past. They were like, great, amazing. How can we help you? How can we, help push it forward? Instead of the opposite, right? Of being like, well, who do you think you are? And like, you're not even a good person to be doing this. But that's the beauty of it, I feel like, is that there are people who want to help, and don't burn bridges. Be a good person.
Right. It's interesting. I'm like, what does this say about me? That this is where my head goes. I feel like when I hear something like that, I kind of am immediately thinking about like, what's the rebuttal? Because, we've heard so much, especially during COVID, and now with this like crazy labor crisis that's been going on, that, there's people just kind of like giving the FU to their boss, the company, whatever. And sometimes we're cheering them on because sometimes workplaces or bosses or whatever can be abusive, right? Like,
absolutely,
like there
toxic,
are situations where, if you can get the hell out of there, by all means do it. And so it's not to say, like, don't burn bridges isn't saying just be a people pleaser and, be in everybody's good graces and everybody has to love you and back to the martyrdom thing, right? Like, that's not what we're saying.
No.
But I think that there's still so much wisdom in that idea, because you might think, well, I don't give a crap about these people. I'm moving on with my life. But you never know how they might play into future opportunities that are a better fit for you, like it's happened for you.
Yeah, I think about it of like burn the institution, right? But like
not the relationships.
Exactly.
Yeah, unless it's just someone that you just need to say, I'm just not going to engage with this person.
Yeah,
that doesn't mean that you have to, then go gossip about them to everybody. And
exactly.
I mean, if you need to warn someone, maybe don't take a job with them, fine. But that's another thing I've tried to be mindful of is gossip. And it really is so tempting, because it's so, unfortunately, such a uniting like activity that we love to like, we're like, oh, did you hear what this person did?
It's a bonding. It comes down to like our primal way of bonding.
But we know it's not the best way of doing that. So I'm trying to challenge myself to not do that as much, even when I feel like, oh, but I'm so justified because did you see what this person is charging? And like, that's not ethical. And well, I don't need to gossip about it.
Yeah.
You know?
I led a leadership workshop on that recently. And it was literally bringing those aspects into it. And the only thing that I could find as a common thread that people can relate to is high school gossip.
Yep.
Whether you were, you know,
the gossiper or the gossipy.
Exactly. Like, it didn't feel good on either end sometimes. Yeah. And we know when we were on the receiving end of it, how it didn't feel. So we get grown up, though, and we sometimes forget about that. And then in those places, though, we have to remember, well, what do I want to perpetuate? Do I want to perpetuate a high school environment, or can I have good boundaries and adult conversations and good communication? And what affects me and what doesn't affect me? Yeah. You know, how can I bond with people without having, but it is so hard. It is.
Yep. So I want to ask you about one more change. Because you did become a mom during the pandemic, right? And I feel like as someone with no interest in doing that, I'm like a little anthropologist studying from the outside. And you know, obviously I observe that it changes people's lives in different ways, and it's not a monolithic, like everyone has the same experience. So on one hand, it is a massive change to your life, I'm sure. And on the other hand, I just want to say too that even if like your daughter is so central to every single day and is like the most important thing in your world, I just also really appreciate that it's very clear to me that you're still a whole person, even, you know, outside or in addition to being a mom. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to share about just like what are the biggest ways that has changed your life?
Yeah, I love that you said that too, and I have several thoughts on that. One of it, to speak directly what you said about a whole person, is I just was having this conversation with somebody else the other day because I said, you know, my mom hat, that is a part of me now, and that does make up me, but it doesn't make up all of me, right? I'm still a whole person, just as if like I'm a partner, I'm a parent, I'm a daughter, I'm, you know, XYZ, all the different.
It is one role that you play.
Exactly. And the role is a huge one right now because she's completely reliant on me. And the thing that I found really interesting that came up for me, which I found fascinating when I sat outside of it, was I really struggled with how do I run a business, build this, and be a parent?
A present parent.
Parent. Because sometimes society makes you feel like you have to choose, and I really don't like that. Yeah. And the irony is that I was literally raised by a single mom who had a very successful business, right? But sometimes
how can I do it?
I know, but the things like closest to us, right?
Sure.
We don't hear. You don't want to take advice from people. You have to like hear from a stranger.
Oh, where there's elements that I didn't like about how I experienced it, and I don't want to perpetuate that for the next generation.
Exactly. And so I sat with that for a long time, and then I had this realization that there are actually so many women around me that are leading both successful businesses and successful home lives. And so I kind of was able to shed that fear a little bit and say, no, I can do both. I can have the best of both worlds. But I say this as like I have this fear constantly coming up with, do we have a second child? Well, one is fine. I can do one. Like I'm in it. Two? How is two, right? And then I have to constantly think about it. There are women who are doing it, and couples and families and partners that are doing it. Yeah. And I think it all comes down to your community around you. And the support.
And that includes also, that support includes your resources, right? Because kind of like you named earlier, like let's just call it what it is, like having the income that allows you to have childcare, adequate childcare when you need it, and assuming that most people don't just have like a family member on standby all the time for that, right?
Yeah.
That is one thing that allows people to quote unquote succeed in both of those spheres. And that doesn't, mean that, we're just going to have the nanny do the parenting. But that's, there have to be trade-offs, and there has to be, you can't be in 5 places at once. And so I always liked that notion of like, it's not about like having it perfect all the time and like perfect work-life balance. It's about like being able to ebb and flow and go that, well, today I'm needed more here, and today and I just have to be constantly sort of shifting based on what's needed right now.
Yeah, and I even try to throw out that word balance from like the vocabulary whenever I try to lead stress management, because I have like workshops for just the employee people as a whole, but then also like one specifically towards working parents, because the idea and the notion of balance is a false narrative.
You'll get there one day. You'll have it figured out.
No, and that's never, though. There is never going to be a time where things are at an equal. And so I heard Jen Fisher of Deloitte, she's their chief well-being officer, she used the terminology integration.
Yes,
work-life integration. Yeah. And that for me just made sense, because I was like, it's so true. And it's an integrative experience constantly. Whatever happens in the morning, regardless if you have, pets, plants, or, human babies, that stress can carry over to the workday. And then however your workday went, that will carry back home. And so that's where I kind of help people learn to like manage and mitigate those, but it's all integrated together. And so saying like you're going to have this balance or you're not, no, there's going to be seasons for everything, right? But I feel like if you're constantly keeping the things that are important at the forefront of your mind, it's going to help guide you along your decision making. One of my favorite quotes I've been hearing and talking about recently is that, you're replaceable at work, but you're not replaceable at home. And I think people often forget that.
Right. And sometimes it's like, it may kind of trip up our egos to think about being replaceable at work, but we should want that. Even owners and founders, like one of my mentors who I'm going to have on this podcast soon, Jenny Blake, talks about, she uses the example of, let's not talk about getting hit by a bus. Let's talk about if you were whisked away to Fiji.
Oh, I like that. I'm borrow that one.
How would your business continue moving forward? Do you have enough systems? And despite how small your team may be, if you're a solopreneur, solo plus, you have a little bit of support, like what are the systems that, can make you essentially replaceable? Because that's how to have a sane sort of integration of your work and life.
And it's so true. But like you said, it's uncomfortable, and it's like, it hurts our ego because we're like, I'm irreplaceable, right? And I have to remind people, somebody had this job before you, and somebody will also have this job after you.
Where you're irreplaceable is in your relationships.
Exactly. Yep. And so those are where I feel like it's really important. But I will say, I never thought I would have loved the moments I got to have with her, because I was building my business. And so it really hasn't been until like January, I would say, that like, it was like, okay, this is happening. Like, let's make stuff happen.
Cool.
And so for like the first 6 months or so of her life, I got to be home with her in a way that I never thought I was going to be able to because of our system. Right? That's the other part of like the systemic issue as well, that just, the system is not designed to support working families. Right? You have a brand new baby and they're like, cool, you get 6 weeks. Oh, you want more? Okay, that's fine. You can take short-term disability at 75% pay. But yeah, you feel free to take those 6 weeks. And you're just going, I'm sorry, what? Right? But I got to be home with her. I got to breastfeed her for a long time because I was able to be home with her. And so it's hard to recognize those barriers that, are there, and yet society is constantly going, breast is best, or breast is best, or whatever like that. And you're like, okay, well, that's not always practical.
Right.
Also, there's so many women and people who aren't able to feed from the chest.
How about we don't make them feel horrible
Exactly.
about it?
So you're telling them they have to get back to work, but they're also still supposed to do this while doing this. And you're setting these unrealistic expectations, and no wonder people have a sense of failure constantly.
Yeah.
So I've been very blessed with all of that. The change has been great. I've learned a lot about myself, a lot about my partner and how we work and all of that. And just being able to see her grow and thrive has been so fun. And just what a privilege it has been to be home with her, but also a privilege to now she's older and she needs friends and to learn, and that's just not my forte.
Yep.
You know,
to get to use some of your resources for some childcare where she can get those things.
Exactly.
And you can then have the time to focus on some of the other things you want to focus on.
Exactly. And so that's, again, going back to like the full transparency. It's the part where it's like I could easily spin my story to be like a sob story of being like, I lost my job, I was 5 months pregnant, I was this and this, and put myself onto this like pedestal of resiliency. It's still resiliency, but it's not to, you know,
but also with, you know, the privilege that you fortunately were in the position that y'all were in at that time.
Exactly. But and so to go back to your initial questions of like, did you intend to do the pivots or the challenges, or how do you rise to it? It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It's, you know, taking life on as it happens and allowing yourself the space to make a decision one way or another. And, you know, to not only have my partner's financial support, but also his, you know, emotional support with all of that. Because it takes two, right? Of what if I had just been like, no, I really want to do this, and him being like, well, you need to get back to work, right? Then having to have those conversations. But he's always been so supportive in that aspect. But it's a windy road, right, to end up here, but it's one that feels so good and so right. And the fun part is that throughout my entire career, even into, you know, childhood, all of my report cards would say, Rosa's a great student, but Rosa talks too much to her neighbors. Rosa disturbs her neighbors. And so I was like, okay, it's very fitting that finally I have stepped into a role and position that I get paid to speak.
Yes.
I get paid to talk. I get paid to lead workshops and help people and just hear their stories and hold space for them and facilitate these means of just little, small, impactful ways. And that's really how I approach it, because people try to overcomplicate things, and sometimes you just let it be easy. Do 2 minutes of meditation instead of 30 minutes of meditation.
Exactly. Yeah, just start back to where we were at the beginning. Just start.
That reminds me, I had somebody who said, you know, and I see this a lot in like high performing people that I work with, and just overachievers and, you know, all those things, and they're like, but if I can't do 30 minutes, then what's the point? And I was like, some is better than none.
Yes.
And it's so much of just how we operate in life.
Challenges,
you know?
are black and white
thinking.
thinking.
It's the classic New Year's Eve, you know, resolutions there. That's the word. Resolutions there. You know, we want to be like, I'm going to work out every single day. You're like, you can't go from 0 to nothing and expect that habit to stick. It's a slow build. We're here for the long haul, not just for a quick fix.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I know I'll talk in some future episode more about this, but I was reading a book about change by Katie Milkman. I think it's called How to Change. But anyway, she talks about there's been a lot of research around resolutions and actually, because I think they got a lot of shade in recent years. And understandably, like we can see, well, 80% of them fail. But think about the other 20% that may never have happened if somebody had not said, you know what, I'm getting a fresh start. That there's actually the science behind the fresh start is really strong. But like, how can we maybe try to set ourselves up for success by going, what actually fits into my life? And if I can succeed by doing, you know, as James Clear talks about, the atomic micro little habit of 2 minutes,
stacking,
I can feel successful in that, and then I can always build and do more.
I always tell people it is okay to reset, restart. What I have in, like when I lead through meditations, for example, I'm like, if your mind wanders 20 times, that's fine. Bring it back every time. Reset.
Return.
Exactly. And it's constantly that. If you looked at my journal that I have at home for my quote unquote journaling practice, it's like, will be really good for 3 days. And then it's like a month off, right? And then it's like, okay, we're back on it. I can't even tell you how many times in my journal it's like, well, I fell off the wagon again.
Here we are.
We're back again. I'm back. You know, but it's that, to me, it's that practice of returning and resetting as many times as you need to, and not waiting for large milestones to do it. It can be like, you know, you can reset in the next hour or in the next day. I personally love Mondays because it's a new opportunity every week versus like people are like, I hate Mondays, and I'm like, I get so excited for Mondays.
It's a fresh start. It's a little baby fresh start. And yes, I'm a fan of those kind of built-in fresh starts. And also like, and I've experienced this today. I got off on the wrong side of the bed because you know what? I was scrolling on my phone when I shouldn't have been for too long. So, you know, what I did was when I did get up, I moved my plug to the other side of the bedroom because I'm like, I need a reset. I need a week or two longer, who knows, where the phone's over there and I don't get on it until I'm out of the bed moving around. Took me 10 minutes to choose what ride do I want to do this morning. And that I was just in this funk. And then I thought, you know what? I can start my day over at any moment. And I'm going to start it over right now. And there are days where you just have to remind yourself that. I get to start my day over whenever I choose.
Whenever you choose. But it's having that self-awareness. And that's where the practice comes into play. And without judgment, though.
Yep. Yeah.
And that's literally the definition of mindfulness, is the act of paying attention on purpose, but without judgment. My definition that I teach is it's creating that pause between the action and the reaction.
Yep.
Where is that space in between that, you know, when you want to say something, right? And then you're like, I shouldn't say it.
Touch every tooth in your mouth with your tongue first.
Yeah. If you feel like you still want to say it, then like by all means and deal with the repercussions, right? But sometimes it's better. So it's creating that little pause. It's creating those moments. But to me, the practice is self-awareness.
Yep.
And that's truly in the workplace, in your life, because it is all integrated.
It's at the crux of change.
It's everything, right? You know, your professional hat, your personal hat, all of it, and whatever hats you wear.
Cool. Tell people where they can find you. All that will be in the show notes and the intro too, but tell us where we can find you.
Yes. Easiest place is going to be on Instagram. It's just Wellbeing with Rosa. My website is rosacastano.com. That's the downside of not having a business name, is that my name is everywhere.
Yes.
So
love it.
Just Googling Rosa Castano and we'll connect, and we'll have a course coming up soon for individuals who would like to have some stress management in their life, and then in the workplace.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. I loved our conversation.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you feel moved to share it with someone you think would love it, or maybe leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I would be ridiculously appreciative. If you or someone you know has an interesting and inspiring story about change, please reach out and let me know. You can send any interview recommendations to creaturesofchangepodcast@gmail.com. For show notes for this and previous episodes, head over to GaiaCenter.co/podcast. That's GAIAcenter.co/podcast, where you can also check out our sister podcast, Bodyful. You can connect with me on Instagram at Val K. Martin, that's K-A-Y spelled out, and at the Gaia Center, which is the name of my Nashville-based therapy practice. You can also sign up for the Gaia Center monthly newsletter at bit.ly/Gaia Center News, where we'll share about groups and events we're offering locally, along with tips and resources from our therapists that we hope will be valuable and relevant wherever you may be listening from. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.